All right. How are you doing today, Julia?
Fine, thank you. Yes, you?
Yeah, it's the midpoint of the week, right?
Yes.
This is it. Lunchtime Wednesday. It's all downhill from here.
Or uphill, depends. Depends what you do at your weekends, really, doesn't it?
That's true. That's true. All right. I think we've got people starting to filter in, so that's great. So welcome. Thank you all, everyone who's joining. It's really great to have you here, and we will soon get going. We'll just give it another minute or so just to allow a few stragglers to enter. But thank you all for spending your Wednesday lunchtime coming along to this and hearing from Julia.
They'll be sitting there eating their sandwiches and listening.
Yeah, that sounds nice. I've yet to have my lunch, so
yeah, me too.
straight after into that. Right, so just as a way of intro, I suppose, whilst people are coming in. So I'm Nick Billingham. I'm the managing director at Charity People. So thank you again, everyone who's joined us. Really excited to bring this to you all today with Julia and in partnership with Julia. I can't resist the opportunity just to take up the chance, I suppose, to kind of tell everyone a bit about Charity People. So I'm sure lots of you will have heard this before, but Charity People are I think, quite an extraordinary place. We are a recruiter for the broad-ranging not-for-profit world, and we exist to support the sector to recruit more effectively, more efficiently, and more inclusively. So I still think of myself as a new leader. I joined or commenced, I should say, this role at Charity People 2 years ago, which was obviously great timing, just as a global pandemic was starting to make its way around the world. But I'm really excited to learn today and to hear from Julia, and I still have masses and masses to learn. And what we wanted to do really was just create a space, an opportunity for people who are, I suppose, at the point of considering options and thinking about their career aspirations and their goals for where they go from here, and providing this opportunity just to ask questions. And I think that's the really key bit with today. Is I just encourage everyone to be really forthcoming with using the Q&A box, so not the chat box for your questions for Julia, but the Q&A box if we can, and grabbing the opportunity just to learn and to hear from Julia, who's a brilliant coach. And I'd say that not just because she sat here with me, but because I've got evidence, because one of our directors is one of Julia's clients. So she's worked with her over the last couple of years and speaks really, really positively, and has written an unbelievable testimonial that she sent me, which is full of superlatives, and I won't embarrass Julia by reading it out. But there is one line which I think is perhaps just worth mentioning, that one of our directors had written about Julia, which is: she creates safe spaces for leaders to explore challenging situations and finds the best path forward for them as individuals and ultimately their organisations. And I just thought that was worth highlighting and mentioning for people to kind of feel really confident that you're speaking to someone who can genuinely help. So I realise that sometimes coming to these types of webinars in a relatively small sector, it can be a bit off-putting, kind of telling everyone that you're here and you're wanting to learn, depending on your circumstances of your current work. So please do change your name on Zoom if that makes you feel more comfortable to kind of put your question out publicly as and when we reach that point. But otherwise, I'll stop rambling and pass over to Julia. And as I say, I'm really excited to hear what she has to say, and really, just would encourage everyone to use that Q&A box and take the opportunity. So over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for that introduction. Thank you for that lovely testimonial as well. I will be having that on my LinkedIn site in the recommendations section. Yeah, some of you might be thinking, well, I know Julia for corporate fundraising, but what does she know about leadership? And I think I've been a senior leader within the third sector myself, but one of the things that I will have in this presentation as well is I've worked with a lot of leaders, not just as a coach since I set up my own consultancy, but also in the third sector. I did a lot of major donor fundraising and worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and managing directors of businesses. And kind of, I took my leadership lessons, a lot of my leadership lessons from them, and looking at how they did things and asking them how they did things as well. And I remember one particular entrepreneur who was really supportive of what we did as an organization, very successful. And I asked him how he kind of reset every year, because how, when you're at the top of your game, you've got a multi-million-pound business and you're making lots of profit, and great employee engagement. I think he was number 2 in the top 100 best. In fact, he did get to number 1, top 100 best companies to work for. That was one of his targets. Sort of how did he keep himself motivated, and what did he do? And there, some of those things I'm going to share with you, and some of the things that I've learned myself as well. So without further ado, I will share my screen. And the title of this presentation is, can you see that, Nick?
Yep, we can.
I can't. No, it's okay. I'll just there we go. What kind of leader do you want to be? And this is quite a conscious decision to make. You have that choice of what you want to do. It doesn't just need to happen to you. And that for me is about taking that so that you can decide, what do you want to be? Don't let it just happen to you. So the very first question I would ask you to consider when you're moving into leadership is, who do you admire? So that might be, I've got 2 amazing women on here who I admire, both of them, Malala Yousafzai and Michelle Obama, and read both their biographies and really admire the way they show up in the world as well when you see them on the media and when you see what they do. But it doesn't have to be well-known people. It can be somebody that you've worked with in a previous role or several previous roles ago, who you really like certain aspects of what they did and how it made you feel as an employee. So you can kind of bring together like a jigsaw of pieces from different people that you admire that you want to bring into your leadership, and then go away and learn something about it. And one of the first people that I decided I wanted to follow one of his examples was a former boss when I worked in the commercial world. And something he always did at the end of a meeting really stuck with me. And at the time I was in my mid-20s. I worked for a logistics company, so that was nearly all men. I was on the board because I was part of their quality management team. I put their quality management systems in, so I sat on the board. And so, as I say, most of the rest of the board were men in their 40s, and I did find that a little bit intimidating, and I'm quite an introverted thinker as well. So, I need to take a bit of time to think things through before I speak. And so when conversations moved on really rapidly around that board table, I kind of got left behind sometimes. And what the chief exec of the business always did was he would go around each person at the end of the meeting and say, do you have anything else to contribute? And he'd name each of us, not just say it to the whole room. He would go around each person. And that really stuck with me, because that gave me my opportunity. If I hadn't had much of a chance to get in and speak during the meeting, that gave me my opportunity. And so that's one thing I still do to this day. When I've got a room full of people, I will go around and name them individually and give them that opportunity to speak and say what they had to say. So yeah, that's my first tip, is look at people you admire and see what you would like to take with you into leadership. And then I just said, learn about some of those things. How can you do those things better? So find some tools. And there's lots of free stuff out there, and lots of, you can pay for courses as well. But I would say look at what's free, but don't just look in the third sector. Look outside the sector, because you can take your ideas from anywhere. You know, it's like your fundraising. Although fundraising is a sector specific thing, you can still look at ideas outside the sector that will give you that inspiration for your next big fundraising idea. You don't have to just copy other people in the fundraising sector. So look at podcasts. And somebody who used to work for you over at Charity People, Carla Miller. Carla has a great podcast about impact and influence, and I think she's one of the top Spotify podcasts or something, and she speaks. She's worked in the third sector, but she doesn't just speak to the third sector. She does a lot of work with people outside the third sector as well. So she brings that kind of cross-pollination across, so you can learn from both sectors. Get yourself on an email list for somebody that you really like what they have to say about leadership. I'm on an email list for somebody called the Leadership Freak, and he's actually an American guy. He sends out an email, I think it's every day, but it's always really short. It's about a 1-minute read. And yeah, not everyone you'll read, you know, some I read and I think, don't think much of that, but there's other things that I read and think, okay, yeah, that's introducing a new idea to me, a new concept. I'll have a look into that. I'll look into that a little bit more. Blogs, there's plenty of people blogging out there, and I noticed on Charity People's website that they'd done a blog recently on your role goal. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on, but that's a really interesting one to read if you're looking to move into leadership, and what would your goal be for that leadership. It doesn't have to just be leading, you can have something else as well. Follow people on LinkedIn. There's lots of people out there on LinkedIn. Just yesterday I was getting emails from various people, and I made a note, a guy called Marcel Schwartz and Daniel Goleman. One of them was talking about emotional intelligence, which really useful in fundraising, but also in leadership. And Marcel Schwartz was talking just about leadership. So find the people that are the ones out there that resonate for you, because some will and some won't. And there's one that doesn't resonate for me, but I know a lot of people love him, is Tony Robbins. I just can't listen to him. I just always want him to just clear his throat. He's so gravelly, and I'm like, just have a good old cough, Tony, you know. But it puts me off listening to him. But Tony Robbins is a great one for motivation, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs and business leaders listen to Tony and his motivation and his talks about motivation and leadership. Find a website that can support you. Again, there's lots of websites out there where the people are posting podcasts and blogs and information. And the Charity People website, I was looking at their blogs yesterday, there's a lot on there around leadership. It's not all about recruitment. Books on leadership, I have a shelf full over there. But again, finding the ones that you think are interesting. There's one that I know a friend of mine bought recently. She's just moving into leadership, and it's called The First 90 Days. And so that kind of gives you some ideas around what you should be achieving, or what you might consider achieving within your first 90 days. There's lots of courses on leadership. Again, there's I know Carla Miller does some, but also Institute of Leadership and Management. If you have the funding for something like that, that's a recognised leadership course. And again, it's private sector. It's not specifically targeted at third sector, but it's useful because of the concepts are the same, whether you're leading in the third sector or leading in private sector. And one-to-one coaching, and as Nick mentioned, that's something that I offer people, and there's a couple of people on here as well, actually, I noticed, who I know, and some of them have had one-to-one coaching with me. And coaching is brilliant, because coaching teases things out of you, and it can challenge you, it can support you, but it's basically getting the answers out of you, because you know the answers, you just need somebody to help you bring them out. So there's lots of tools there that you can use. Another one is to find a mentor, and this can be formal or informal. If you're lucky enough to be in a big organization, you can maybe ask somebody else in the organization to mentor you, or you can look externally. And there's certainly, I've had mentors in the past. When I was in a leadership role, I asked one of the entrepreneurs that I worked with if she would actually mentor me, and she was more than happy to offer that to me. and that went on for over a year, and that was very successful for both of us. And when I'm saying formal or informal, you can pay to be mentored. And again, that's the service that I offer. So you can pay somebody to mentor you, or you can go down the route where you actually ask somebody that you know if they will mentor you. And most people are really honoured to be a mentor, because that demonstrates it's somebody you admire and aspire to be like. And the beauty of a mentor is a mentor's been there and done it. So they can actually give you some tips on the pitfalls and can help you to get through those various challenges within leadership role. Have a strategy, and right at the start of this I said don't just let it happen to you, be strategic about it. So like you would have a fundraising strategy, have a leadership strategy. So, and I've mentioned role goal here, have aims and objectives that you want to achieve. So that might be, you might go into a team that is in complete disarray because there's been a lot of change recently. There's somebody's left the team, those sorts of things. So your role goal may be, I want to create a team where people feel settled, where they're performing well, they're hitting target. That might be your goal. Or it might be something more specific. You might want to bring in change. You might want to be the person who creates change. You might want to, I know this is more of a comms thing than a fundraising thing, but they quite often cross over. You might want to bring in a new brand. That might be your goal, because that's also something you can then put on your CV, that when you're in this leadership role, you actually achieve this. It might be a capital appeal that you want to hit the target on. It might be introducing a new income stream. But whatever it is, have that goal. It might, as I say, it might fit with what your fundraising goals are as well. It might be something different around creating a settled team that has a good work ethic and is hitting target. And those other areas you'd look at around that are budget, timeline. How long do you want to achieve that in? Is it something that can be achieved in 12 months and then you change your role goal, or is it something that's going to take you 3 years and then you may think about moving on? Have a timeline for it, and also build in that review and reflect once a year at least. You know, what was my leadership strategy for this year? Have I achieved it? And what's it going to be for next year? And within that, have a professional development strategy. So I gave you a spreadsheet. I gave you a list there of all the different tools there are out there that you can use. So have this professional development strategy. Where do you want to be in 5 years? And as part of that, okay, how does this, stepping into this leadership role, how is that going to help me fulfill those things? Do I want to be a CEO in 5 years' time, or do I want to be a director of fundraising? If I want to do either of those things, what do I need to be developing professional development wise, so that when I go for the next job, people can see evidence that I have reshaped a team, done a restructure, done some change management, managed challenging behaviour, got rid of somebody who was underperforming. Those sorts of things are things that are, I don't know whether Nick would agree with this, but you know, are good on a CV that people can see, yeah, you stepped into leadership role and you've made it your own, and you've got those solid achievements that we can present to somebody recruiting and saying, look, they're ready for the next step. What do you want to learn more about? There's so much out there to learn on leadership. You know, some people, this is their full-time job, running leadership courses. What do you want to learn about? So again, it's bringing it down, focusing in, what are those specific things you want to get really good at? Could it be change management? Is that the thing that you want to be really good at? Or could it be bringing on performance in an underperforming team? Who would you like to learn from? So is that others within the sector? Is that external? Is that Michelle Obama? Is that me? Is it Carla Miller? Is it Nick? So who do you want to learn from? And that will help you with deciding on who your mentor will be and which blogs and podcasts you look at. Where can you meet other leaders? Now, this is really important. Meeting with other leaders so that you're not alone. You don't feel like I'm out there on my own and I don't know how I'm going to carry on. And if you're in a big organization, you might be on the senior leadership team, so there's other leaders there. But if you're in quite a small team, you might want to look outside of that and look at where you can meet other leaders. And again, there's networks. if you're an entrepreneur, you might join Young Presidents. If you're in fundraising, you might want to, I run a membership group called Fundraisers Collective. You might want to be part of that. Lucidity Network, Lucy Gower, she runs a membership as well. So there's other places you can meet leaders. And I know that Charity People also running something for people who are new CEOs. How much is the budget for your training? So that's whether you get to spend some or whether you have to go for all the free stuff. How long will I stay where I am? And what would keep me here? So you might have a role goal that is, I want to implement a change. And when that's done, I'm gone. But if they bring something else in, like a capital appeal, would that keep me here? So, have a think about that. And so when will I move on? And what do I want my next job to look like? And that will help you in some ways to define the sorts of things you want to learn professional development wise. And finally, because this is only a 15-minute talk and it's not very long to talk about leadership at all, find your cheerleaders. And we all need to be part of some kind of group or team that will be your cheerleaders. And when you're in a leadership role, it's often difficult for that to be your team, especially if you're implementing some really difficult changes or a restructure. So you need to find your cheerleaders. And as I mentioned before, I run a membership group, and they're a great set of cheerleaders, and they're all on WhatsApp supporting each other when difficult things happen. But you find somebody for you who can be your cheerleaders, and when times are tough, you can go to them, and when times are great, you can cheer somebody else on and feel like you've got their back. And that was my 15 minutes.
Perfect. That's pretty much bang on, isn't it? That was about exactly 15 minutes. Amazing.
I've had lots of practice.
I'm going to have a sore neck tomorrow because I've been just sat here nodding, but I think that's a good sign.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thanks so much, Julia. That was brilliant. I'm going to go into some of the Q&A. So again, please do be forthcoming and don't be shy. No such thing as a bad question to our attendees. So we've had a question in there, which is, Julia, I've applied for a promotion opportunity at my current charity. What would your top tips for the interview be? As the person conducting the interview is currently doing the job, she is going on maternity leave. So I don't know if there's anything that springs to mind for you. While you're thinking about that, I'll jump in just as it's an interview / recruitment question, and say the first thing I would do, and I obviously don't know the person leaving, and the person who's asked this question will probably have a better steer as to how comfortable they would be doing this. But I would go and chat to the lady or the person going off on maternity leave and see what their tips would be. And I personally would feel quite comfortable doing that, just pulling them to one side and saying, would you mind just having an informal discussion about the process, what you're hoping to see in that process, and what I can do in preparation for that. And they may bat you back, and that's okay, but you've asked the question and you've taken that opportunity that's there. So that would be my suggestion. But Julia, what is there anything you would add to that?
Well, I think that's a good idea to go and talk to them. I'm also thinking a mat cover quite often want a safe pair of hands, so somebody who'll look after it for you. Or are there some difficult things to do that they might feel you can do while they're not there? Does a restructure have to happen, and would they prefer somebody else to do that? So it's understanding what's going on in the organisation, which is where you have an advantage over an external candidate. And you understand the organisation itself and how it works. So there's lots of advantages of recruiting somebody internally. But my gut feel is a mat cover usually wants a safe pair of hands. So somebody's going to look after their team, look after their projects, and just keep it going with business as usual, so that when they come back, they can step back into the role and not too much has changed. Yeah,
perfect. Straight on, have you any advice on how to lead change across a board of trustees or within a board of trustees?
There's there's loads of great books out there on change management. This is one of the things that I'm really interested in. There's one book called Our Iceberg is Melting by John Cotter. And John Cotter's a big change management leader. And I would recommend that book. Have a read of that, because that gives you his 8 steps of change management. And the whole thing around change management is initially getting everybody to see the vision. And sometimes that means you just have to get a small group of people who can see what the issue is. And in the book, Our Iceberg is Melting, the issue is the iceberg is melting, and it's a group of penguins that live on an iceberg, and that's really quite challenging for them. Other booksellers available. But it's about, if you read that book, or even just Google John Cotter and his steps of change management, you will see the steps and you follow those. And if you look at any change management that's done really well, they use those steps. There's other change management models out there, but they all more or less do the same thing. There's one that actually has, I think it's Letwin, and he has, again, an iceberg is involved. He has an iceberg or an ice block that's in a square. That's where you start. Then you melt it into water. So that's where the change is happening. And then you reform it into a triangle. So that's your new shape. But it's the same steps as John Cotter's. And it's a lot of communication, massive amount of communication, and getting people on side and letting them see what it's going to look like in the future.
And I'd add to that, if conscious that some people don't like reading that much, there's quite a few apps out there that will just give you a summary of books, a small fee for it, but essentially, give you the headlines in a sort of 10-minute reading window. And I've used them before. There's masses of stuff, and you feel like you're really educating yourself because you're getting the headlines, albeit you move or lose some of the learning, I guess, that comes from reading a book and really understanding the case studies and getting to grips with it. But okay, very good, thank you.
The John Cotter one is actually, it's like the Peter and Jane of books, actually. It's got lots of pictures in it. I love it because it's really simple. Right. It's not a big academic tome, so. Perfect.
I think this is a really interesting question. Can you be a leader within a team, but not as the head of the team? I'm a manager in a smallish team, but not in an official leadership role.
I think you can, yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you're the person who takes responsibility for things and makes sure things are done, you often are the person then people will go to and ask about what do we do next, or what should we do in this situation. So you don't need to have a badge to be a leader. You need a badge to be a manager, but you don't need a badge to be a leader.
Yeah. And I think the only thing I would add to that is the best advice I was ever given was to take an interest in the wider organisation, and for that to be a real primary motivator internally. How successful is the wider organisation, and really getting a sense of success breeds success. So if my colleagues are successful, I'm going to be more successful as a result. I think that mindset hopefully will help in that particular situation. What advice would you give to your younger self as a junior manager?
Don't worry, you can do it.
Yeah, nice.
I think I really underestimated my own ability and had big imposter syndrome, which most people have imposter syndrome. I think the only people who don't have imposter syndrome are psychopaths, actually, because they have no emotional intelligence to actually realize that sometimes you're a little bit out of your depth. But yeah, you can do it. Absolutely, you can do it.
Is there anything you would add on imposter syndrome as a kind of headline strategy in terms of dealing with that?
Yeah, I saw a really interesting model, which was, it was 2 circles that intertwined. So you've got that vector in the middle, and the vector bit was imposter syndrome. And I'm going to try and remember now what the other 2 circles were. And one was underestimating how good you are at what you do. So when you say, oh, well, it's not rocket science, actually for some people it is. So that was one aspect of it. And what was the other side? I can't remember now.
We can.
I will find it and send it to you, and you can send it out. But it's basically, you create the imposter syndrome yourself by the way you think about your ability.
Perception. Yeah.
And so if you think about the things you're saying aren't rocket science, and I always challenge this in people I'm coaching, it absolutely is rocket science to some people, the way that you can build relationships. So if you appreciate that as an ability, actually the imposter syndrome is less likely to rear its head.
Yeah, perfect. We've got a ticking clock next to us, haven't we, essentially? So it makes answering questions a little bit more difficult when you're put on the spot like that. But thank you. That's pretty much it for time. So Julia, thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
I've learned a lot, and I know that everyone in attendance will have done as well. So yeah, thank you again. And thank you everyone who joined us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Great.
Bye.